Welcome everyone to the continuing saga of the Vegas Dice Kings. And let's not forget one of our top co-hosts in the nation, Johnny Law, our newest star and rising star, Ralph Delegati, a Paisan, and me, Danny Craps. Now before we get into it, please, VegasDiceKings22@gmail.com. Please email us your stories. If it's good enough, you'll be on the show with us. Believe me, and it'll be a riot. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Mr. Law.
Good afternoon, guys. So, I had a couple buddies in town this week. So I've been out here 50 years, but the little town I am from by Pittsburgh, I have been in touch. I got a group of friends, it was about 15, we're down to about 9 now, of guys just so close. They come out, and everybody I know from home really looks forward to when they come out here, because I take them and do a lot of the stuff that, regular tourists don't do. So we started off at the Grand Canyon. If you haven't been out there for a long time or ever, you got to go. But I'll tell you what, we went to the walk there, with the
Skywalk.
glass.
Skywalk.
Yeah, Skywalk. And very disappointing. The glass is real, just worn out. Everybody wears them shoes, but I wasn't impressed with it all. But the second place they take you to, like Guava Point or something, absolutely gorgeous. We'll put some photos on there. And then on the way home, we decided we'd go to Laughlin. We stopped at Laughlin. I've been going down Laughlin since it was a dirt road. The Riverside was the biggest hotel, and it was a 2-story motel, basically. It didn't have any high-rises back then. I got a movie of my daughter, Lindsay's 38, and she took her first steps at the Riverside Hotel in Laughlin. So we did that. The Colorado Bell, if you've been down there, is closed up. It's sinking into the river. And what's amazing is it's a boat. It's a replica of a boat, and it's sinking. So anyways, the Colorado Bell is all done. We stayed next door at the Pioneer Club, which is a motel from way back when. Haven't changed a whole lot. And we did come up to the Strip, what I like doing when people come. And I'm telling you this because I love Las Vegas. Las Vegas has been my passion my entire life. Whether you gamble, whether you do stuff around. I had that tour company for about 10 years, take people all these different places where the other tour companies don't take you, Valley of Fire and all this other stuff. So I took them out there and let them do the damn tour. And then we had a damn sandwich at the damn cafeteria. It was pretty damn good. We had a damn drink, and so we had a damn good time. And we went to what I do. So when I have friends come to town, when it's time to do the Strip stuff, we parked up on the top of the Bellagio, up on the top floor there, and we'll do the loop. We'll go down, look at the garden at Bellagio, which is always beautiful. By coincidence, the other day when we went, is the first time I've ever been there where they're switching it out and it was closed. I've never been there for that, like morph or whatever they do with it. So we did that. We went over to Paris, checked it out, went up the Eiffel Tower. Then we worked our way over through the Flamingo Pool. A lot of history at that Flamingo. Ralph would know a lot about the Flamingo in the old days. But they've always had one of the cooler pools, swimming pools. So we went over to the High Roller, locals. Now we ride it for $12, I think it was. It was kind of cool. I like going up there every once in a while, see a few new things. I'm going to get some more information on the dome that they're building behind the Palazzo.
The Sphere.
The Geo, what is it called?
It's in conjunction with Madison Square Garden, and it's called the Sphere, and it's going to have 20,000 seats, and it's going to have various venues, and it's going to be unlike anything ever built in the world.
That's what I heard. I heard that when you sit there, if you're Chinese, you hear Chinese,
Yes.
the person sitting next to you, German, they hear it in German.
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't know how they do that.
It's gonna be
It's
unbelievable.
going to be unbelievable, yeah. So we went over to the high roller there, and then we came back, went through Caesars. You would know about Caesars, Dan. I got lost. Everything's different.
Yes.
First of all, there was nothing better where the pit was, that dark dome where the electric horseman rode his horse
Since
through.
'66.
Exactly.
And if you see the electric horseman, I'm leaning over and the horse almost tries to bite my head thinking it's some hay. For real.
Really?
the horse
Yeah.
thought your head was a carrot.
It looked like
So
a carrot.
anyways, that's all done. There's not no more big buck. There is no big buck anymore. Bellagio, Caesars, nowhere. There is no longer big baccarat anywhere, which I don't know. I always thought it was kind of cool. I always thought there are a lot of players that really enjoyed the big game, but that's how it goes. So we took them down to Pawn Star. We did the Shelby Museum. It's free. Unbelievable. The Shelby Museum is unbelievable. And we did the Mob Museum. So I got these books. I'll show you the picture here. The hotels used to do this is Caesar's Palace. But at the Mob Museum and the display, some of the Vegas displays, they had one from the Stardust, because most of the hotels did their own little magazine. So it was kind of cool. If you haven't been to the Mob Museum, it actually mentions my little hometown, where I'm looking forward to somewhere down the road. I'm going to have some of my friends from back home, and we're going to do a Pittsburgh show. But yeah, it is related to our theme, crap dealing and stuff like that, because our town was big on bringing junkets, right? Junkets. Ralph knows about junkets. Danny knows about junkets. Newer people, that's when guys would bring a group with a ton of money, boom, 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 hit and run. That's when they did RF&B. Everything was free. They don't give you nothing now. They're ready to start charging for drinks at the 21 table. I don't know. Anyways, my passion for Las Vegas. Las Vegas is the greatest, man. You got to get out there. Just walking down the strip, looking at everything, kind of cool. So, anyways, that's my little spill there. We're gonna let Ralph. Ralph already should be familiar, hopefully, to some of you guys. I want you to keep watching. We're gonna have Ralph on regular for quite a while now. He has like 54 of these books full of stuff. He has every single paycheck stub he ever made. Everything.
The other thing is that a lot of the audience doesn't know is because he's a wealth of knowledge, he's banned from Jeopardy. He's banned for life.
Oh my God!
And
You learn something new every day, huh?
that's right.
Danny is hilarious, huh?
I'm being abused here. I'm being terribly abused.
My wife says I'm funnier lying down.
Yes, you are. From the waist down. All right, looky. We're going to let Ralph talk for a while. Here's Ralph's book, The Last Casino. This book is dynamite.
Unbelievable.
This book is the only one.
Yeah, you bum.
I haven't had a chance.
It's kind of like for locals. If you're an
really
old
get to
dealer, if you're a new dealer, get the book and read this. This is the actual vocabulary. This is everything. Ralph was an amazing man in the business. He is the history. Like you've heard me say, kind of the guys who come out here in the 70s, early 80s, up until it was done table for table. I felt like we were a new generation, but Ralph is the guy who was, he's the one part of that started it all. And he's an amazing guy. Look at his book. Ralph, I'm going to let you take it away, brother.
Well, thanks a lot, John.
Before he does, I want to know, when you mention no more big buck, I want to know Ralph's take on that, because he was a big buck guy for many years.
What about it right now?
John, I'm stunned to hear that. I had no idea.
Is it the first time you heard it?
I had no idea that they would do, and that scares me a little bit. Scares me for the town. If they can't find a reason to maintain the baccarat the way it was, if they don't have the business to justify that, that scares me a little bit. for the town of Las Vegas, because that was a big money maker for the casinos. It was where the big money was bet, and now if they're closing those down, I can't see some of the players that I knew that would be wanting to sit at a small baccarat table and play.
Well, but supposedly that's what they want. Now, we talked about it a little bit before. Everything's changing. So apparently, maybe the new players don't like that. So I was a crap dealer. I'm an old school crap dealer. I dealt crap till it turned, till the IRS messed with us and put an end to it. And I was at Bally's, and I remember I'm standing there in the dice pit looking up on the porch, and there was a baccarat table there. And, they stood around a lot, but that's when I got into baccarat. Like Ralph says, I always felt like the big baccarat game was the heartbeat of luxury. You got three guys, girls in tuxedos, you got the money, you got this, and it's like a good big bot game is like a good crap game, and like Ralph said, he just heard about it. Ralph is an old school baccarat pit. He ran baccarat pits his whole life, and these are the kind of stories that kind of throw us off, and but life goes on. So I want to hear more about Ralph from right out of the gate. What'd you do, brother?
The thing about the baccarat thing, quickly, the thing about baccarat initially when they started it on the Strip, it was cash too. It was a big game with big limits, but it was all cash. There wasn't plaques, there wasn't chips. It was all $100 bills, and it was huge. The volume of business, and everybody in town, even some casino managers, wanted to be a baccarat dealer or work as a boss in the baccarat pit because they were cut in on the tips at that time. If you were a coat man, is what they called it in those days. If you were wearing a sport coat or a suit, you were a boxman and up to any position. You weren't allowed to take tips anywhere, wherever you were. And in the old days, you could get fired if they found out you were taking tips from the dealer or cut in or something like that. It was very much against the rules of the place. But the baccarat pit, you were in on the tips, you get a full cut, and the tips were enormous because of the volume and the size of the play that they had. Sometimes they were slow. Certain areas on Graveyard sometimes, and the daytime was slow. But when they got business, they made up for it with the volume and the size of the money. It amazes me now that they're eliminating those games. I don't see how they must have their reasons, they're business people, right. But it doesn't make sense to me now. But I haven't been around, so I don't know. Maybe things have changed a lot.
Give me one, at least, scenario of just tons of cash on a game, on a baccarat game. Like, where the most cash is. So when on a dice table, the boxman sits over the chips, same way in baccarat, you have the chips in the middle there. How did you work out with the cash? Was there a big thing, or was there no giving?
It was just in front of the dealers.
But I'm saying, was there a ton of cash there?
There was packets, $10,000 packets.
$10,000 packets.
$10,000 packets, and when you had to make a payoff, you didn't count the packet. That
right.
was a $10,000 packet.
10,000 at a time out there.
But and if somebody if they brought chips over, like a $500 chip from blackjack or craps. They would bet the 500. If they lost it, you picked it up. But if they won, you paid it and changed the check over. If the player allowed you to, you always ask them, "Is it all right if I change it up to cash?"
Right.
And if he said no, well then you left it out until he lost, and you put it away. But it was all cash, all $100 bills, and that's what got in my book. I wrote about quickly. When they stopped the bosses from doing the count in the 70s, the bosses used to be the only people allowed in the count room. They built the casinos so that they could skim cash out of the count room for and it went back to St. Louis or Chicago, whoever was behind built the casino, and they used it for whatever business, legal or illegal, they wanted to use it for. And the reason they built those casinos early on in the old days was just for that reason, to skim cash without tax-free cash to use for their other businesses, to build up their other businesses. Now all of a sudden the IRS said you can't go in the count room anymore.
Right. Yeah.
You have to allow cocktail waitresses and security guards and those people to go in and do the count. And you have to show us the box after you dump everything to make sure there's nothing left inside the box in front of the camera. And so they weren't allowed there. Now the people that built the place that they were working for still waiting for that attaché case, a suitcase or whatever every week or every month. And they wanted some cash, so the only place they could go to get it was in the baccarat pit.
So what he's talking about with the cash in these count rooms, I think casino did a good job with kind of hitting it on the head. But there is one scene, they're in the count room and the guy comes in with an empty attaché case, opens up the thing, throws a bunch of cash, walks out. I mean, we've literally seen these guys walk out of there with these.
Well, that's what they built these casinos for.
Exactly.
They built them specifically to draw cash, tax-free cash, for their other businesses, to expand their other business, legal or illegal, whatever they wanted to do. A lot of them used the cash to build to construction companies, and they ended up building a lot of the high-rises, you know. But anyway, that's what
That's how
about
it was,
the baccarat.
right?
Yeah, that's how it was in those days.
All right, so let's hear about it, Ralph.
Okay, I got to finish. Well, first, let me just say a real quick thing to you folks. I'll be talking about the early days of the casino industry when I was involved with it, and some other things as we go along. If there's ever any question you have about what I'm talking about, the email address is right up above here, and please be sure and send an email to me, and it'll get to me, and I promise you I'll get back to you with as best an answer I can give you as soon as I can. But please feel free to ask any questions you have or anything you'd like to know. I'll be happy to answer for you. Okay, now I have to finish the story that I almost finished last time we talked, but it was about the showgirls that I met when I first came to town. It was the first thing that I did when I got here. I had just driven down from Los Angeles, and I met the girls, and I got into that story pretty well. What I was talking about is we had just left the party for the group, the show group. They had a party after the show, and the girls were taking me to their apartment. So we parked in the back area of where the apartment was, and we had to go past the swimming pool, and it was like early in the morning, I don't remember what time, it was very early in the morning. It was still dark, and before I knew it, they were stripped and they were in the pool calling me to jump in the pool with them. So it took me about 4 hours to get undressed and jump in the pool, but I made it. And so we had a lot of fun in the pool, playing and laughing and choking and half drowning ourselves. And then we got out, picked up our clothes, and ran into the apartment. And there was one bed, and that's where we stayed. And I ended up bringing my stuff in, and I moved in with the girls for until their visas expired, and they couldn't get them renewed because I couldn't quite understand what they were trying to make me understand about it, but I think it was because they were too young, and they couldn't get them renewed. They had to go back to France.
Ralph, let me ask you, they were French.
Yes.
And their English wasn't that good.
It was.
And your French wasn't that good.
I had zero French and they had zero English, but we got along. We managed, you know. It was okay.
That's amazing. That's what I call international relations.
Yeah. So international. So anyway, we went all over town. We explored southern Nevada. The girls weren't allowed. That's another strange thing. You talk about stories about strange things about Las Vegas. They weren't allowed in a casino because one hadn't turned 19 yet and one hadn't turned 20 yet. and I had just about turned 21. So, but I never got bothered because I looked a lot older than I was. But they weren't allowed in the casinos, and yet they were allowed to walk on nude on a stage, and yet they weren't old enough to go in a casino, you know. So anyway,
They had a specific duty to perform.
yeah, exactly. So anyway, I had a real good time with the girls, but I still had to go back to New York, and I told them I've got to leave. I made them understand. I left some of my clothes there and one of my briefcases and luggage, pieces of luggage, and so to let them know that I was coming back, but they didn't understand really why I was leaving, and there were some tears about it, but I did leave. And I was driving back, and I didn't have a lot of money because I had lost some while I was staying there with the girls, and I still had to go back to New York and come back, and I didn't want to leave the girls. I wasn't in a hurry to leave them for a couple of weeks at a time. I cared a great deal for them. I was really very much connected to them. So I get to Albuquerque. I think it's 400 or 500 miles from Vegas. And there was a sign, it was at night, it was a big sign that said, "We pay cash for your car." And I had that beautiful Cadillac, and I said, darn it, what am I going to do? I don't know if I'll make it all the way to New York and back, and I missed the girl. So I pulled in there, I sold the car for $2,500, got on a puddle jumper and flew back. And now I go back and took a cab to the apartment, and woke them up, and they were, oh my God, it was like Christmas, when they saw me that I came back from wherever I'd gone. I didn't have a car anymore, but I was there. So we had a lot of fun exploring Lake Mead and Mount Charleston and all over Las Vegas. I couldn't take them in the casinos because they were afraid to go in. They didn't want to get in trouble. But I did take them to the dunes once, and it was the funniest thing you ever saw because I had these two beautiful girls kind of hanging on me. And when we walked in, and I wanted to play some I didn't know how to play blackjack. And the craps that they had here, I didn't know anything about that. The only craps I knew was against the wall in a schoolyard. So I didn't, I was reluctant to get on these tables, but I wanted to try something. So we went to sit at a table. Now, the funny part of it is the men couldn't get over these two girls both hanging on me, just you could see that they cared a little bit about me. And the women seemed really disgusted by the whole thing. And it was a whole different way of seeing it between the men and the women. But I lost some money and we left. And we had a lot of fun just exploring the thing. But then it came time for to get their visas renewed, and they couldn't get them renewed, and they had to leave, and that was a heartbreaking time for all three of us. We all three cried at the airport, and they were gone. I never heard from them again because we didn't know how to communicate English and French. But I did see a picture of one of them in a Playboy magazine where it's French showgirls that come to the United States, and there was a picture of her in that
Isn't
article.
that something?
But that was it. That's the last time I saw anything of her. So now I stayed in the apartment because they had it paid for a couple of, I think it was 10 more days or 2 weeks, and then I had to stay in another place until I got a job because I had lost most of my money. And then I got to the point where I lost all of it, and I had to find a job. So they were talking about the Mint hired people to work in the slot area downtown. So I went down there, I took a bus, and I was out of money, and they hired me to pay off jackpots. In those days, it was mechanical slot machines. There wasn't anything electronic about it except the lights. They plugged it in, it would light up, but that's all it did. Not all the commotion that you get from them today. Everything was mechanical. So if they hit a jackpot, one of us would have to take the number on the machine, run over to this booth. They would give us the payoff, and then we deliver it to the players. So all the coins were wrapped in paper. You've seen how they wrap the coins in paper. There was paper all over everywhere in those days.
Right, yeah.
They had to clean it up because people would take the coins out and just throw the paper anywhere. And that's how it was. They had metal trays when they had payoffs. They would fall into these trays. I think they made them purposely that way so you could hear all the activity that was going on in the slots, because when the coins hit the trays, you could hear it through the whole casino, So if you had an active slot area, you could really hear it, and it drew a lot of people, I guess. But anyway, that's what I did. What I tried to do, I hadn't eaten anything the first shift. I had gone without any food, and I had no money, and I just was too stupid to know that when you lose money in a casino, if you lose a certain amount, which I had, if you go to one of the bosses and say, can you fix me up with a meal, they'll comp you. They'll take you into the restaurant and take care of you. But I didn't know that. So I went to one of the bosses and I said, I was ashamed to say I'm hungry. I said, I'd like a $5 salary advance so I could get something to eat. And he said, well, you can't you just started today, right? I said, yes. He said, you have to work 3 shifts before you can get a salary advance. You can't get in, nobody's going to give you, it's against the rules.
What year was that?
This was 58. You can't get a salary advance unless you work 3 shifts. So I said, okay, so now what am I going to do? So I went home, and all I had was ice water and ice cubes, and I worked 2 shifts, and then I went in for the 3rd shift. I worked an hour or so, and I went up to him again, and this is the truth. I hadn't eaten anything. And I said, please, can I get that $5? I'm busy now. See me a little later. I went again a couple hours later. Will you stop bothering me? I've got more important things to do. And he walks away again. So I waited till the shift was over. I was getting pretty desperate. I was sick, really. I didn't feel well. I went up to him and I grabbed him by the arm. I put a grip on him and I said, come on, we're going to the cage. You're going to get my money now. I knew I was going to get fired, but I didn't care. I was desperate. So he pulled his arm out and he went like he was going to hit me. So I knocked him down. I picked him up and I knocked him down again. And then I picked him up and I was doing this to him against a slot machine. And a security guard that I had befriended came up and said, Ralph, put him down. You're going to get me fired. Put him down. And so I let him go. I got handcuffed. And they took me up to the boss's office upstairs. And we told him the story, but the cops were there already. And I thought I was going to jail, and I told the story. I said, I was just trying to get something to eat. I haven't eaten in 3 days. I was desperate. I was willing to get fired. I have nowhere to go. I don't know where I'm going to work or what I'm going to do, but I'm that hungry. I have to do, he wouldn't give me the money. So they said, well, we're going to let you go down and get your money, but take the cuffs off him and let him go. So they let me go. So now I'm going out of the place, and a guy comes running over that was the assistant to the big boss that I banged around. And I thought I was going to have to fight him too, I was running out of energy. And he says, no. He says, I want to help you. He said, where are you going? What, do you have a job? What are you going to do? And I said, I don't know a soul here. I don't know anybody. I just want to get a job and make enough money to go to Los Angeles. I'm too ashamed to call my people and tell them what an idiot I am, that I lost my car and everything else. So I want to work my way and go back to California, have a job there. He says, well, come on, I'll take you across the street. And he took me across the street to the Nevada Club. And he introduced me to a fellow named Norm Little. You'll see a picture of him along with this story. He was one of the nicest guys I've ever met in Las Vegas. See, he was one of the owners. He had a piece of the place. He put me to work. He heard my story. He put me right to work. He said, you be a shill and a break-in dealer, or you pick the game you want, either craps or blackjack. And I was scared of craps because it looked so difficult. But it really intrigued me, and the blackjack seemed like, I just wasn't right for me. I thought I'd be bored dealing blackjack. But the craps, when I looked at that, I said, I don't think I can ever learn it, but I'd love to try. It looked so involved with all those different colored chips all over the place. So that's what they did. They gave me a job working as a shill. For those of you who don't know what a shill is, I don't know if they still use them. I've been out of the business a long time. But in those days, if you had an empty table, they hired people. The minimum wage was $1 an hour So you worked for $1 an hour as a shill, and you sat at the table, at an empty table. They'd give you like $10 chips, and the Nevada Club was all chips. And you bet $1 if you won it. You picked $1 and left $1. If you lost, they took it and you put another one down, until people were reluctant to come to an empty blackjack table or a crap table. It looks like the trap set, But if you have a couple of people that are already active, then other people will come in and join the party. So that's the reason they had shells, and it makes sense. So that's what I did for 8 hours. At the end of that 8-hour shift, they would put me on they had a place that they rented. It was right where the oh God, what's the name of the, I can't remember the name of the place now. The Four Queens? No. Was it the Four Queens on the corner?
Yeah,
Yeah.
across from the Nugget.
Yes, the Four Queens. Well, before the Four Queens was there, it was either a drug store or a UPS store, and in the back of that store there was a little warehouse. So the Nevada Club had rented that warehouse and put a crap table and a blackjack table there, and that's where they had their school for their shills and their break-in dealers. There's a fellow by the name of Bob Womack, who was a box man at the Nevada Club, who taught the crap dealers on this table in that little warehouse. And that's where I would go after work and maybe be there another 4 to 6 hours. I didn't get paid for that. But so I made $8 for sometimes a 16-hour shift. But they taught me the game, and they would tell you if you don't like it, we got a long list of people that are waiting to take your place.
Yes.
So that was the deal, and at that time. So I made up my mind that I was going to practice as hard as I could and work as hard as I could. I wanted to be the best that I could be. I took pride in the fact that I wanted to be good, but I really had doubts about whether I could do it or not. But slowly I learned the game, and then once I started to where I could handle the chips pretty well, they put me right on a live game. And I said, well, I'll make tips now. That'll help. I got better than $1 an hour. I might make another $2 or $3 in tips. But since I took a dealer off the table to take his place, whatever tips I made went to him. So I never could keep any of the tips that I made while I was a shill. Only once I got to be a dealer, then I got to keep the tips I made on that table. So that's how I broke in. It took me about a little more than 3 months before they made me a dealer. And then they raised me to $12.50 a day and whatever tips I could make. And that's how I started dealing craps. But before I get too much into that, I'd like to tell you what kind of an environment it was here in Vegas when I first came here. The strip itself was called, I think it was Highway 90 or Highway 91, something like that. It wasn't the Las Vegas Strip. There was a few casinos, but between the casino, between the Tropicana and the Sands, there was a huge piece of desert. There was nothing on it at all. I used to ride a horseback on that. Between one hotel to the next, you'd ride horseback in the desert part of it, and then you go on the sidewalk when there was a hotel sometimes, or you go behind the hotel, and then it was all desert again before you got to the next hotel. I have a photo that I gave to the producer here that shows a picture of the Las Vegas Strip taken in 1959. And you can see just a block on either side, east or west of the Strip, there's nothing but desert and dirt road. I think there was 3 traffic lights when I first came here in the whole town. One on Sahara in the Strip, one on Charleston on the Strip. Charleston at that time was the big shopping boulevard. It had the most stores. It had a movie theater. That was the big where most of the people shopped. And then the other light was on downtown on Main Street. And that was the 3 traffic lights that I know of. I don't think there were any other. The rest of the time, if you got off the Strip or headed east or west, there was a stop sign and then dirt road. And nothing but dirt road everywhere. So it's changed quite a bit since then. I remember I'd come over, I loved the lake, and when I'd come over the top of the mountain at night, it was a sea of lights. It was the Strip and downtown, and that was the only light you could see, that T. Everything else was pitch black. No, nothing. So anyway, one of the things that I brought a picture of too was the only food market in town. They called it Market Town. It was probably 20% of the size of the move market that we have today, but it was about 3 blocks north of where the Sahara is. And they had, it was one of the main places where everybody in town used to go to shop for food. And they had a little, what they called a snack buffet, and you'll see that when they put it up. You were able to eat a free snack buffet while you shopped. You can go and put snacks in your basket.
Yeah.
While you walked around, it was all free, and that's what they did to attract people. But they didn't need to, because they were the main place anyway. So there was that, and one of the things then, I'll get back into the casino part of it. One of the first things they taught us was you don't ever judge anybody by how he's dressed, what he looks like, what he speaks, his attitude. You never make a judgment of everybody who comes in here is a good customer. Everybody is Mr., Miss, or Mrs., treated with respect. Doesn't make any difference what they look like. The other thing was, if you steal, you'll be sorry. And that's all they said. But the word gets around very quickly about from the other what happens to you if you stole in those days. The majority of the time, it was mob run downtown too, but most people didn't realize that. But the security guards would take you in the cage and break all your right hand, their fingers on your right hand. And the funny part of it is, when you healed up, if you could still deal, you could get a job. They didn't blackball you. That was always strange to me. But if you punch somebody, they made a very strong point about this. If you hit somebody, either a client or a fellow worker, you would be blackballed in the state. They would make sure you couldn't get a job anywhere. That's how serious they saw that.
Yep.
Compared to stealing, it was far beyond that problem for them. The reason being, I think, is that they didn't want to have that reputation. They didn't want to go to court because there was some rowdyism going on in the casino. That part of it, of course, they would always pay rather than go to court. They had to make a payoff to somebody, pay them off. But they just didn't want the idea that it wasn't safe, that there was fights going on or any of that kind of an idea. And they protected that. And they made you, that's one of the first things they taught you. God help you if you punch anybody, either an employee or a client, because you'll have to leave the state. So that's one of the things that they were very sure to tell us about. The other thing was hustling. In those days, they were very strict about it. Firing a fence the first time they caught you. You couldn't ask, don't forget the deal, or no matter how nicely you said it, you couldn't do that. That was very much against the law. And anybody who wore a coat, whether it was a box man or a floor man or a pit boss or whatever, could not take anything from any of the employees, could not, or from the customers. They could not accept a tip. They were paid a decent salary, and that's it. You couldn't accept anything. So that was one of the other rules that we had to be made aware of when we were dealing. Don't try to offer anything to the boxman that you're dealing with. So I got into the dealing part of it, and I learned it, and I had a lot of fun doing that. I got to the point where I was really surprised that I was able to manage in a normal crap game, but I wasn't good enough yet for the good crap games, the big ones, because there were a lot of various colors that you had to switch around with, and I found that wasn't easy to do at the beginning. And I was so nervous, my hands sweat so much that the chips would stick together. They would get so wet, they would get soggy, and they would stick together. So automatically when they relieved me, the guys that relieved me knew right away, and they would just grab the stack, put it in, and grab a new stack because it was all, ugly. But I couldn't help it. I was so nervous and scared to death. And I was always playing with the chips, and I was always getting yelled at, but I couldn't stop doing it. So I was still considered a lump. I wasn't considered a good dealer. What they called you, if you weren't a good dealer, you were a lump. And if you were a good dealer, you were a jam up. You were a jam up dealer.
That's right.
And
that's
so
right.
I was considered a lump. So and I was always playing with the chips, and they would say, they would go like this, and I would just stop. So one day they took me, they tapped me off the game and said, "You got a telegram in the pit." And it scared me to death. I thought something happened at home because, nobody gets telegrams in the pit. So I went over and I was shaken, and I opened it up. I didn't realize that all the employees in the place were watching me do this, and the panic that I was in, and they're all watching me. So I opened it up and I read it, and it said, "Get off the chips, lump, and watch the game." And it was sent by one of the other dealers as a joke. But he told everybody, "Watch Ralph when he gets this." And when I saw it, at first I couldn't believe it. Then I looked around like this, and the whole place was laughing at me. They all thought it was a big, get off the chips, lump, and watch the game.
Get off the chips, lump, and watch the game.
Me being the saver that I am, you're going to see that telegram. I saved it, and you'll get to see what get off the chips, lump, watch the game.
That's unbelievable. I'd have buried it in the backyard.
So anyway, I got to be a dealer. I managed after a while. I was pretty proud of myself, and I accomplished something that I really never thought that I could. And I said to myself, you know what? This is fun. Vegas is amazing. It was like a berry patch to me. Beautiful girls everywhere, money to be made, always something to do, fun to do. I said, well, I don't want to go anywhere else. I'm going to try to make a career here, and instead I'm here now. I've got this accomplished. There's no use going back to California. I'll stay here, and that's when I made up my mind to stay here in Las Vegas. The thing that bothered me the most, or that made me most concerned, was the tips. It took me a month to make $100 in tips. I kept a record. You're going to see that. I'd make $5, $3, $2. A week, would add up maybe to $20. Excuse me. But it took a month for me to get around somewhere around $100.
When you guys were getting that kind of, did they put change in your
What do you mean?
envelope?
Oh, sure.
When I broke in,
absolutely.
when I broke in at, I was still going to dealer school, and I would go to Lady Luck and practice, and sometimes they'd let me do a whole shift, and they'd give me whatever tokes they made. So back then, when we all had cash, what they did was the toke committee would have all the money divided, and they would put it all in envelopes. And then while you're on the game in the pit, they'd walk up and down the pit. Right, you always put it in your back pocket. And then when you go on break, you can't wait to see how much money you made. But at the Lady Luck, they used change back then. That's, it was a big they wouldn't give you 2 or 3. If you made $2.50, you want that other 50 cents.
Oh, absolutely. 50 cents was a lot of money. Well, in those days, though, there wasn't a tow committee because the craps pit, we got tips just for the 4 guys on the table. We cut up whatever we made. There was no such thing as the craps going all in with the. They did it in the blackjack pit with the roulette dealers, but where they all put it together. But in craps, it was your crew. The 4 people that worked that table kept whatever they made, and the other crew might make a lot of money, and this crew might make nothing. It depended, but you kept what you made. So we just cut it up amongst ourselves, whatever it was. But the point that I was making is that the most I made while I was dealing was $100 a month, and that was a lot downtown. And I kept hearing about all the money they make. I wouldn't even believe what they were telling me about what you made on the Strip. So when I thought I was good enough, I went to the Strip, and the first place I saw was the Sahara, so that's where I pulled in. And I walked into the Sahara. I asked who I had to see about getting a job in the casino, and they sent me to a fellow named Johnny Hughes. He was a casino manager, a great gentleman, a really nice man, really hell of a guy. And I told him I was working downtown. I had been working a while, and I thought that I could do well as a dealer. I'd like a chance because they told me they have to tell him you want to try out. So he said, well, I don't need anybody now. He said, you come back to me, some other time. He said, I'm fine. So I waited a week, and then I went back. And he said, he saw me, and I said, how about it, Mr. Hughes? You got anything for me to try out yet? He said, no. He said, come back later. There's no, we're good. There's no hurry. Give me a couple of weeks. So I waited 2 weeks, and I went back again. And I did that for 3 or 4 times, and finally he said, look, I'm tired of looking at you. I want to hire you and put you on a different shift so I don't have to see you anymore. He said, go over there and let me see what you can do. So I'm dealing away on the checks, and they're chips, as we call them, checks. And I'm doing a great job. And then a guy walks in. I could have killed this guy. He threw in a $20 bill and says, give me some silver. So I reached in the tubes. They had tubes of real silver dollars, believe it or not, in those days. So I grabbed the stack and I went like this, and they went all over the floor because you talk about quicksilver. You put it in my hands and you had quicksilver. I had never dealt silver. We dealt dollar chips down there, and I was really good with the chips. But the silver I was a mess with, so I turned around and I said, they took me off the table. And John Hughes took me aside. He put his hand on my shoulder like this, and he said, Ralph, you learn how to deal those, and you got a job. You can handle the checks. You're a good dealer. He said, you learn how to deal those and come back to me, and I'll put you to work. So 2 weeks later, I came back. And he tried me out, and he said, you got a job, and they put me to work. And that's how I went to work at the Sahara.
Ralph, not to interrupt you
ahead.
that much,
Go
but
ahead.
when you said with the silver, that was the premise for the Long Ranger. High-hole silver
Oh,
away.
Yeah, right.
That's where they got it from, the crap.
Well, and that's where
dealers.
I think that's where they got quicksilver from too, because it was so slippery. I couldn't believe that dealers can deal that stuff, But I had to learn it, and that's all I did was practice, and I got the job.
That's probably what you did that 2 weeks is practice.
That's what I did. But
Yeah.
the point that I was leading up to when I started this quick story is the $100 that it took me to make in a month, I was making, now that I was at the Sahara, we made about that much, a little more, a little less every day. We averaged almost $100 a day. And to me, that was heaven. My God, I used to sweat it out for a month. This was my food money. I would get that couple of dollars, and that's what I lived off for food because my salary wasn't anything by the time I got that.
Did you give up the ice water?
Boy, I sure did. Well, I'll tell you a quick story about that. When they gave me the money and they let me go, I ran to the Golden Gate. They had like a diner. It was like a diner setup, like you would go in the old diners. That's what they had at the Golden Gate. You sit on a stool and they fed you. It was like a diner. So that's where I went with my money to eat. And I had a big meal and a shake, a big milkshake, and I stuffed myself, and I felt like I was going to explode by the time I got up. And I walked out, and there was a step you have to take off when you walked out to get onto the sidewalk. I took that step and I threw up everything all over the sidewalk.
Yeah, you hadn't eaten in 3 days, and when you got the $13 after slapping the guy silly, you went and
I threw up the whole meal. Yeah. Anyway, go ahead, John.
I was just going to say, any crap dealer who really wanted it, and Ralph made the statement, he wanted this. And I'm going to tell you what, when I got here, I wanted this. I wanted to do whatever I had to do. And just little things like he's talking about, silver dollars. I was going to dealer school, and a couple of people said, get 2 stacks of silver dollars and practice with them. Because if you're a crap dealer and you can deal silver, you can deal anything. But with regards to being a crap dealer, on the other hand, getting good, the benefit of learning to deal with silver dollars, you can actually, if you were a good, see, I learned to be a clerk before I learned how to make money. And my point is, if you're good with the checks, if you make it, if you have what they call a clean game, you can make mistakes and people don't really see it because you're so smooth, and, it's a pleasure to watch. But, going back to the silver dollars, and when Ralph said, I really want this, that's how I was. I really wanted to show. I mean, I wanted to be here.
But guys like Ralph and you and others that wanted to be craps, and they didn't make it that easy. These guys would see if they could discourage you.
Yep.
They'd say, you're never going to be a crap dealer. I mean, I was the son of a crap dealer, and my dad was jam up. And they would say, kid, you might want to go to the blackjack pit. I mean, your mom should have aborted you. You're going to be your dad's a jam up crap dealer. You're going to, you're embarrassing him. And meanwhile, you're trying to make payoffs, and these guys are bashing you. And you have to learn how to accept that criticism. And like my dad said, the only thing they're going to respect is your ability. Are you going to be good enough to where they're not going to say anything?
Right.
And that's what you want. When
Right,
they quit criticizing you and they see you, you know that you're coming around. Am I
So
right?
I mean, there's something about what you said that reminded me of something. When I was with the shakes and sweating and everything, after I tried that a few times, one of the shift bosses at the Nevada Club, he took me, put his arm around me, he said, Ralph, he said, you're a nice kid and we really like you a lot. He said, but you're never going to be a crap dealer.
Yeah,
He said,
yeah.
why don't you let me set you up in the blackjack pit? He said, because you're not going to make it. And I said, no, please let me keep trying. Please let me keep trying. That's what I wanted to do. And,
Well,
you know what they say, if you keep doing the same thing long enough, you're going to get better at it.
Right.
And I finally caught on.
Well, like Danny just mentioned, these bosses will try to discourage you. And I think I mentioned it on a previous show. So when my buddies were in this week, Scott and Douglas, my dear friends for my whole life, we went downtown. Anytime I have somebody come in, I take them to the Horseshoe and I showed them that front game, which at one time was the busiest crap table in the world.
It was.
And that, I told them, this is where I was born. And I pointed to second base. But like you were talking about them trying to discourage you. And I said this earlier in a couple shows ago. I kind of lied my way into the Horseshoe there. I did my first 40 minutes talking about sweating and everything and like that. And when I turned around, Tommy Krause, Rick O'Hara, boom, they grabbed. And they said, listen, we're not going to fire you, but we're going to try like hell to make you quit.
Yeah.
And Tommy did that. Tommy Krause did that every day.
That's
And I remember the girl I first was with when I come to town, God bless her, I love her. She's the one that told me to be a crap dealer. And so I remember going and looking at a crap game. So intimidating. I had no idea what I was getting myself into, but I wanted it. And I wanted it really bad, you have any more of that story, Ralph? Or?
Well, there's one other thing that I think when we're talking about that era in the late 50s and early 60s, the mob guys, I have to give them credit for the way they operated a casino. Las Vegas became what it became because of the way they ran the casinos. When they built the casino, like I said before, they built them, they opened them to have a place where they could take some cash and bring it back to home. But they knew how to make it so that it would attract people. They knew what to do, and the first thing to do was what they call loss leader. I know that's the word that I heard. I don't know if they still use it or not. I know the corporations don't use it, but that I've seen. But what they did is the showroom, the restaurants, the room rate, the hotel, the buffets, they lost a huge amount of money in each one of those. I've put a list of buffets that you'll see of what the price of the buffet was in 1959 when I started, around when I started. The most expensive buffet in all town was $2. So most of them are $1.50, and the silver slipper was 24 hours a day at 98 cents. You could eat breakfast, lunch, dinner for $3.94 a day, and have all you. I mean, they had a great buffet. It wasn't junk. It was a great buffet for 98 cents. 24 hours. So the casinos lost money that way. The limit was $500. So what they were after, what they wanted to attract was volume. A lot of players, a lot of people, working type people. When you walked into a casino in the 50s and the 60s, there was all kinds of activity. There was a huge racket coming from the slot area because they had metal trays, and most of the coins would fall into metal trays except for the bigger what am I trying to say? Jackpots. So it was different than the activity. It was always full of people. Crap games were always full. So were the blackjack tables, and the slots were huge, big business. And the reason for it is everybody could afford to come here. The rooms were cheap. I saw the Rat Pack. It was $25 for the second show. You know what it costs to have Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., and all the rest, what they must have paid those guys to make that group? They certainly didn't pay for it with $25 a person. They took a tremendous loss on that. But you should see what the casino looked like when you came out of the showroom. It was the tables were full of big, huge play that stayed all day and for weeks at a time, and they were huge attraction. So what my point is, they knew what to do. They made Las Vegas what it is. The working guys, remember, it was only a $500, was as much as you could bet. There wasn't these big, huge, big action, $100,000, $50,000 guys. It was all little players that came in with $20, $40, $100,
Yep.
and that's what made Las Vegas. That's what built it. And it hurts me now that you have to pay thousands of dollars to see some big entertainer,
Right.
when you could see the Rat Pack for $25 in those days.
$9 for a beer.
Yeah, $9 for a beer.
Right,
Hey, you talked about there was a cheap meal you said, or something that you. They had the Golden Gate had a shrimp cocktail. It was like this big. The shrimp looked like alligators. They were so big on that thing. 50 cents.
Yeah.
50 cents. You
I
remember
lived
that?
off of that when I broke in
Well, there you go.
73.
Yeah, there you go.
Everybody.
You know that. Okay.
That's one of my more famous things on that. Anyways, I just wanted to touch on my version of a couple of things Ralph talked about. He talked about, respecting players. So going back to me having the opportunity to start my career at the Horseshoe, which was amazing. But one of the first things I learned, and this was from the old man, old lady, and naturally Teddy and Jack too, but you respected every player, because in that front game, the main game that I was talking about, you have this guy betting 25 cents. This guy's betting 500,000. Over here you got Jimmy Chagra. You know what I'm saying? But they're all the same, because these guys who are betting 25 cents, whatever, they are there every day, and every check that they get once a month, this is where they spend it down there, And I was honored because at Binion's, crap dealers, we weren't allowed to wear jeans. Everybody else could wear jeans and stuff. Crap dealers had to have a nice white shirt, nice dress pants. Now, we were allowed to go drinking on our breaks because we were allowed to do whatever we wanted to do, as long as you could deal the game. And going back to you practice, whatever. I always heard it takes 5 years to be a good crap dealer. I'm gonna tell you what, that's about as true as you can get, because in actuality, on a crap game, you never stop learning. You'll see something go on that you have never seen before. That reminded me of a quick thing. So I'm doing it at the Horseshoe, right? I'm on the crap table, and I'm still kind of new. I don't know what's going on. And I was on the stick, right? And a guy rolls the dice, and one lands on top of the other one. And how's that? And I looked at the boxman. The boxman was Royce Miller. This guy had already been in the business 60 years. He said, no roll. Kick the dice.
Stack dice.
And he said, he says, I've never seen that before. So no roll. The next roll of dice, it happened again. So I'm thinking like, and I'll never forget that. It's like, we were talking about, you always see something different. Anyways, that just popped in my head the time that happened when I was new. I didn't know what to do when the dice landed on each other. But going back to Binion's, that's, if you want to learn not to steal, and work at Binion, because they beat the crap out of you. We'll talk about that later. I'll also mention, going back to the history of Las Vegas, those of you local people who have a passion, like I said, I went down to the Mob Museum for the first time. I was amazed, but they got a lot of these maps with all the desert and stuff like that, and they teach out at UNLV too, out in the library at UNLV, a beautiful 7-story glass library we have, but they have a bunch of old maps and a bunch of old interesting history. People from Vegas here, you guys, if you haven't seen this stuff before it's too late, get out there. Las Vegas is dynamite. The history is like no place else. There is the one Facebook group. If any of you are on that Facebook group, I grew up in Vegas, baby. Spread the word out there to watch the show. I'd love to get some input from some of you people. You got some interesting stories. So Ralph mentioned how small the town was. When I moved there in '76, the freeway only went to Jones. Flamingo didn't go over to 15 yet, and Rainbow was the edge of town. Rainbow was 2 lanes with no streetlights when I moved here. Nellis was a little bit busier, and I think that's part of the reason why Samstown opened up out there. They were the first people to like get off the strip and do that, so there's a lot of history with that. That was kind of cool. And then, we mentioned Playboy. All right, so in my hometown, all right, there was this gorgeous girl in my class, 1972. She was at the Kmart there shopping, and just by coincidence, a photographer from Playboy, like, lived in Boston. He was cutting through my hometown, New Kensington, for some, and saw her. Make a long story short, she was in Playboy. Nancy Cameron was the first double centerfold. So you open it up, boom, turn it around, the backside, and she's the only double centerfold there's ever been. So it's the 25th year anniversary, 1972, for Playboy. Nancy Cameron in there. What a gorgeous girl. I was friends with the family. I owned a business with her brother and stuff. So, and I want to finish up with...
Playboy was my adolescent training ground.
Right.
I hate to tell you, I worked for Playboy.
Finally, hey, a little less than inflation here. Everybody's talking about this inflation and everything now. I mentioned, I think, last week or whenever, when I went to dealer school right there on Sahara in Las Vegas Boulevard, right across the street was Jolly Charlie. On break, we would go over there and get a 25-cent beer, 25-cent hot dog. So when Scott and Douglas were in town this weekend, we went downtown. There's a new hot dog joint called Dirt Dog, kind of like where they put all this crap on a hot dog. We got 4 hot dogs, okay? Jolly Charlie, 4 hot dogs were $1. Our bill for 4 hot dogs the other night, $97. I'll put a copy of the receipt on here. Look at that. $100 for 4 hot dogs.
I don't relish the thought.
That's inflation.
Well, you're
Hey, anyways, we can go forever, boys, right?
Yeah.
Ralph, you did a good job.
Thank you.
Hey?
One last thing, the
Yes,
Jolly
sir.
Trolley, who was run by someone you might have known, Billy Cutler, that was at the
right,
Dunes,
very well,
and
sure.
and you had the hamburger, and you got to see some girls that were scantily clad. For a low price.
Yeah, it was dynamite. It was dynamite.
I bit my tongue.
Everything about Las Vegas is dynamite. I don't know how you could ever want to be anywhere else.
I don't know how they could not want to tune in next week.
Right. Well, next week we might. I'm probably going to maybe. We're going to have Ralph on. He has an infinite amount of stuff, so we might do a couple weeks where in between Ralph, I'm going to start getting some other dealers on here. Actually, I'm going to give you my email. Okay, so on on our show, the Dice King email. Go ahead and send stories, anything you have, but I'm going to give you my personal one, Outlaw Croupier at AOL. You'll get it on the screen there. This is where I want to hear stories from dealers. Give me a little pitch, a couple sentences of a story that happened in a pit. I've started getting a few. I'd like to get a lot more. So Outlaw Croupier, you'll see it on the screen there. I'm looking more for only dealer stories in the pit. Something happened on a game, that kind of stuff. Give me a short little email. I'll check them out. And then if we're going to use it, we'll go ahead and pursue it. But in the meantime, keep everything going to Vegas Dice Kings 22 at Gmail there. And we'll see you guys next week.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Danny. Thank you,
Ralph. Thank you, John.
Our hero, John Stiles. Thank you, John.
JS.
You're the greatest.
See you next
What a
week.
great man. Anyways, we'll see you guys later. I hope you enjoyed it.
Keep the dice rolling.
All right.